Jung is the person we're going to talk about today and next time. And I'm going to talk about him in some ways indirectly, because the best way to understand Jung is to show you what you do with his ideas rather than really presenting the ideas themselves. But I can give you a bit of an overview. One of the things that differentiates the depth psychologists from, say, behavior therapists, even from cognitive scientists, is that you might say in one way they're more mystical, which means more from the romantic tradition than the cognitive scientists and the behaviorists. So there's a temperamental split there, right? Because people who are high in openness, and both Freud and Jung were very, very high in trait openness, are very interested in the domain of the imagination and the domain of fantasy. The more pragmatic people, the more practical people, are not going to be attracted to therapists who deal with issues that have to do with the imagination and fantasy. And so there's a natural parsing, and one of the things I've noticed in my clinical practice is that imaginative people have a dream life that cries out to be interpreted in archetypal terms. But everyone isn't like that. I also have clients who never dream at all. And then I've also seen when I've lectured to people, this is like, so maybe I'll do a seminar for the medical students and tell them a little bit about the symbols of transformation, really, because they're involved in, first of all, transforming, because they're medical students, and so you have to transform them to a doctor, and also, of course, they're helping people through transformations all the time. And so it's useful, possibly, for them to understand those processes more deeply. And there's always about half the medical students on whom the more symbolic stuff just falls flat. It's like talking about color to people who are colorblind. And I've thought about this a lot. And I really do think it's based in temperamental differences. So if you have an active fantasy life and you have an active imagination and you're a good visualizer and you dream a lot, then that's the sort of person you are. And if you're on the other end of the scale, which would be that you're very conscientious, let's say, and very low in openness, which also tends to make you more conservative in your political presuppositions, by the way, then dream analysis is probably not for you, partly because you're just not going to come up with that many dreams. And even if you do, they won't necessarily be informative. So there's been a very long battle in some ways in the psychological and psychiatric community between people who take different perspectives on how you might address psychological problems. But I don't know if the issue of type has been thought about seriously enough in that regard, because we're really only starting to understand the dimensions, the actual dimensions of personality properly, and to figure out what it means to be on one end of, say, openness and versus the other one.